Also find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and of course on coasttocoastam.com. Boy, we've got an incredible program for you tonight with Stephen Quayle. His latest work, Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II. I can't wait to get into this with Stephen. But we do have a breaking story. Tom is back in the Los Angeles office with that. Some of you will know this person. Tom, what do we have?
Well, Scott Weiland apparently was found dead on a tour bus, and it's quite, I don't know if coincidental is the word, but he was the lead singer for Stone Temple Pilots and also a band called Velvet Revolver, which was a man named Slash's band, who is an ex-Guns N' Roses guy.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, Guns N' Roses is just about to announce that they are going to get back together and tour. So it's kind of synchronicity, I guess. Yeah. It's sad, though.
No cause of death at this time?
Not at this time. It's too early.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Okay.
And we're going to come back in a moment with Stephen Quayle and begin the night as we talk about Empire Beneath the Ice. Welcome back to Coast. Stephen Quayle with us, author of course, one of the great books called Breathe No Evil, which is a very incredible book to understand bioterrorism. And for the past several years, he has been talking about bioterrorism, weapons of mass destruction. Number of works have come out since we started talking with Stephen a zillion years ago. He has been an expert with us talking about Genesis 6 giants, true legends. Tonight we're going to talk about something different with Stephen, and that's called Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II. Stephen, what an amazing title for a book. Welcome back.
Well, good evening and good morning to those who it's already morning. You know, George, one of the interesting things that is in history is that if you do enough digging, you'll find out the stories that have been buried. Now, when I took this on originally, it was in my book Genetic Armageddon, which you and I introduced to your listening audience, a decade ago.
Yeah.
But going forth, what I started writing this and really researching it, for the past couple of years, but writing, it 8 months ago. And what was fascinating to me, and should be fascinating to everyone now, is the direct admission that Hitler never died. I don't know if people have been noticing it, but the mainstream media across the world is all of a sudden pulling Hitler out of the bunker in Berlin that he never died in. Now, what's astonishing to me is that we've all heard of the Hollow Earth theory. We've heard of Admiral Byrd, Operation High Jump. We've heard of all those different, if you will, almost rumors from the close of World War II. But as I started to really investigate First Secretary of Defense Forrestal's, quote, suicide, actually murder, Admiral Byrd's talking to the press after Operation High Jump, which took place in 1947. The whole premise of this book is that the United States did not win World War II. They had if you will, a showcase and a show cause with the Nuremberg trials, etc. But when we squared off against the Nazis in the South Atlantic with basically 15 ships, 2 aircraft carriers, and 3 of the most famous admirals in the Navy up until that time, this wasn't a coal expedition as mainstream newspapers tried to portray it. What was fascinating to me is 2 years before the Germans, quote, officially surrendered, the biggest multinationalists, both financiers and technology-related companies and drug-related companies in Germany, started moving their assets to different places in the world, primarily South America and into the Antarctic. Now, what's interesting, I don't think most people have ever really paid attention to this. So that's what gave me the prompting, George, to write this. I'm going to quote just a real quick historian.
Sure.
James Robert, WW2 historian and writer, interviewed a British wartime SAF officer, and he said in the summer of 1944, British scientists and commandos had found an ancient tunnel. Under orders, the 30-strong force went through the tunnel, but only 2 returned before the Antarctic winter set in. And what was interesting is the 30-man team was relegated to 2, and what was the most fascinating thing is they talked about Nazis under the ice, polar men, and an under the ice city. Now, that's been a common denominator for so many years, and behind all of the intelligence that's gathered, you cannot separate the interrelationship between the financiers, the financial parties of both the United States and Germany, and the different nations of the world, and the cover-up of ancient German technology. So the German technology was interesting because in the 1947 Operation High Jump, there was a literal battle using flying saucers, and even the Russians have a documentary and an interview with the generals that explain what went on. So this stuff got declassified from the Soviet archives when, the breakdown of the Soviet Union, and the KGB opened up a bunch of their information to the public. So what we have now is we have the real reports of Admiral Byrd talking about the spaceships that could fly from pole to pole almost instantaneously. Now, first people will dismiss this and say, oh, this is crazy. What's going on there? But the Antarctic became more fascinating when a lot of the events that have been associated with aliens, UFOs, and all the different phenomena seem to kind of aggregate there. Most people believe that only 50 of the U-boats were unaccounted for. Interesting, when you and I did a show a number of years ago, I believe one of it was a great-grandson of Admiral Donitz, who was the Reichsfuhrer after Hitler supposedly died. He was the German U-boat commander for all of the U-boats, the submarine forces, and his great-grandson called me after you and I were on and saying, you're the only one that has ever spoken about what my grandfather said, or maybe great-grandfather, that the world wasn't ready for what's coming down. Now, it's my contention that with all the Hitler even series on TV, I don't know if you've watched
them. Yeah, I think it was the Discovery Channel, was it?
Yes, sir. And why all of a sudden? Well, here's what's going to happen, in my opinion, and we'll give the bottom line and then go back and build it. The idea that the advanced weaponry that Germany possessed, the advanced genetic alteration and experimentation that went on, and I put up for your listeners today on my website the whole story of Dr. Mengele in Brazil, which they made a movie of, the boys from Brazil, and the point is that in one little town in the middle of nowhere in Brazil, what was found were some of the greatest amount of twins. I don't know if you remember that story, but it's fascinating that Mengele escaped. No one ever found him. He is believed to have died in the 70s, but the point being is as you start to track down each and every one of these anomalies, they all lead back to the fact that Hitler did not die in the bunker, that the genetic engineering experiments of the Nazis and the Third Reich were so far advanced that their advanced weapon systems that they absolutely introduced into the world scene, so much of that became classified after World War II that the United States even had an operation signed off by the president that was called Operation Paperclip. And under Paperclip, famous guys like Dr. Werner von Braun were brought into the United States and given new identities, and they were divorced from any of their, quote, Nazi affiliations. And it was Walt Disney, I think in 1954, that promoted Dr. Werner von Braun as literally one of the smartest men in the world. So there has been a cover-up that has been ongoing for all these years, and it all goes back to and this is going to be fascinating for people, the Germans spent an intense amount of money, expedition, and literally to the four corners of the earth looking for ancient artifacts and relics. They even had a group called the Ahnenerbe, and the Ahnenerbe meant ancestral heritage. It was Hitler's belief and the Third Reich's belief that they were the Aryan race, that they were somehow the noble Nordic warriors, and that it was their duty to reinstitute the Uberman, you and I have talked about that, or the Supermen, or the race that controlled the planet and would control the world. Now, people don't understand that megalomaniacs with money can get whatever they want accomplished. So in Empire Beneath the Ice, how the Nazis won World War II, I lay it out, and with enough footnotes. I was telling somebody that the footnotes are extensive, and even the zero-point energy, like Nick Cook and others who have been dismissed. I mean, some of these guys are fabulous, fabulous investigators and
Sure.
researchers. And when you add it all up, the Nazis absolutely tapped in to the multidimensional Stargate realm and were given so many advanced weapons. It's my contention, the bottom line, that, and I'm going to overuse that word, and somebody will send me an email saying, you say that all the time. I'm cutting to the chase, that the Nazis absolutely, through their banking interests and through their conglomerates, still rule the world and are going to bring about the Antichrist, and it's going to be the most astonishing thing because they're going to use the technology they've developed that the world's kept hidden and that they possess and that our government possesses and that the Russians possess. Now, why is this important? Well, we're at World War III.
We are
You
there.
and I have spoken in the past about it, and I think the other day I looked it up and there were 100 million Google searches or something for that term. Well, what people have been emailing me almost by the multitudes, more than I've ever gotten before, asking, do you really believe this is going to go to World War III? And at some point, yes, I do, because, you'd have to be insane not to see that we in the United States have been provoking Russia through NATO. Now, look, I'm talking about...
I'm amazed by Putin's restraint right now, Steve.
Oh, I am too. And by the way, I believe Vladimir Putin was the most honest man on the world stage when he looked basically in the direction of the United States and specifically towards Obama and said, do you realize what you've done? The destabilization in the Middle East, whether it started with Iraq, it carried into, obviously, Libya, it's carried into Syria, it's destabilized everything we've done. It was not this way when, obviously, we left Gaddafi in power and Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
And
all we had to do was keep those people in check.
Absolutely.
And let them do what they did.
And let them do what they do. The interesting part of this, George, is that this thing is not tailing off, meaning the preparation for World War III. Russia and Vladimir Putin has demonstrated. Now, look, I'm not an apologist, but I am a respecter. It doesn't matter who tells the truth. The truth is still the truth. Even you got 40 liars and one guy telling the truth, when you tell the truth, it stands out against the background of lies. So Vladimir Putin has shown amazing restraint. Now, by moving the weapon systems that he's moved into Syria and basically positioning the military assets in the Navy and the submarines and everything else, he's making a statement.
Yeah.
Back off.
Yeah.
And so you ask yourself, why would we, with a military, and these are my opinions, okay, that's been devastated morally, and I'm saying, and through morale, devastated through a lack of leadership with 350 generals, admirals, and high-ranking military officers fired, with a absolute downgrading of our military response and preparedness, with basically a lackadaisical attitude that, hey, we're not going to build up our national defense. Remember that the president, under his early promise, was he's going to have a civilian police force as strong as the military. Well, the problem is the military is designed for external enemies. A police force or a group of brown shirts is designed for the internal.
That's right. Jerry Corsi, in his book, Hunting Hitler, by the way, Stephen, is convinced Hitler fled to South America. They built him a mansion. He shaved his mustache, and that's where he lived and died.
Absolutely. And I think Jerry Corsi is one of the brightest men I've ever interviewed. I interviewed him years ago. I think he's incredibly well researched. But the thing that I don't differ, I take a different approach to this, is that New Schwabenland was the name of pretty much the northern part of Antarctica. The Germans staked out 230,000 kilometers. Most people don't understand this, that the first real claim of territorial expansion was when Germany sent their fleet down there to pretty much flag it, tag it, bag it, and claim it's ours. But in the story I told about the SAS finding the tunnels, interestingly enough, in October of this year, the Arctic anomaly warning a circular opening has formed in the middle of the Antarctic ice pack. That was the 20th of October, 2015. Now, all of the polar explorers, all of them said as they got to a certain point, it got warmer, and they noticed that there were areas that couldn't be, defined by supposedly the ice. And what's fascinating is the fact that obviously people say, do you believe Admiral Byrd's diary? And maybe we can get to that whenever you want. But Admiral Byrd's diary maintains that his plane was taken into one of the polar openings. And what is astonishing is it's not just his story. There's multiple stories and multiple witnesses confirming both on the Antarctic and in the Arctic, North and South Pole, respectively, an opening. And it shows up. So this is on my website. I posted it. Arctic anomaly, warning a circular opening. And what's fascinating is that when Jerry Corsi wrote his book, I don't know if you asked him this on the air, but was he, at that point, the news about Hitler still wasn't coming public with all...
No, Jerry was one of the first to really pop that before everybody got on the bandwagon, Steve.
Right. And so the thing that was fascinating to me is just all of the different interplay, George, between all the different factions in this whole thing. And what's interesting to me is that, and I think it will be to everybody else, is that we get the obvious impression from history that it played out one way. I think it was Churchill that said history is always written by the victor. That doesn't mean history is always accurate. Everybody wants to embellish their conquests, and that's why the Egyptian pharaohs built so many monuments. The same thing with Romans said, look at all the wonderful stuff we did. But when you dig beneath it, you find out maybe all of it wasn't as wonderful as it was portrayed. In the world we now live in, it's called braggers' rights. To the victors go the spoil. And unfortunately, the other thing that gets spoiled by the victors is the truth. So in the book, Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II, I lay it out, but one of the things that I've tried to combine is the fascination with the occult that the Nazis had. Now, after the Nuremberg trials, that was actually brought up at the trials, and everybody kind of snickered and laughed. But it would be interesting to people, I think, to find out that the investigation of some of Hitler's leading men, even the SS, we've been told it means one thing, but it literally means Schwarzsonne, my German's not that great, but it means black sun. So the Order of the Black Sun, Heinrich Himmler, and all of the people that were in the SS were very deeply involved in the occult and believed that they could make contact with other world entities. And in making contact with other world entities, were given dictations. And one of the most famous ones was with a guy by the name of Johann Eckert, or Dietrich Eckert. That was Eckhart, his middle name, Dietrich. The point being is that they absolutely, I guess you would say, conjured up spirits, and then they took the time to literally ask them all the questions. So once again, what most people don't realize is the Third Reich, gods, beasts, and Nazis, you cannot get away from the supernatural. You usually ask me on the show, and we can just hit it right now, when you're dealing with biblical prophecy, when you're dealing with the beast, the Antichrist, the false prophet, you come up with still a time period where the push is towards a one-world government, the push is towards a one-world religion, and the push is through a one-world currency. Well, we've got the Pope echoing that. We've got John Kerry saying, all this world's chaos is to bring about a new world order. That's the whole motto of the global elitists, order ab chaos, or order out of chaos. So when you hear him and you hear George Bush Sr. making that statement 230-some times when he was president, you begin to think these guys are ready to implement.
Oh, of course. They're desperate, Stephen. Hang on. We're going to come back in a moment. Stephen Quayle with us, his latest work, Empire Beneath the Ice. Talk more about how he believes the Nazis won World War II and are controlling things today. Welcome back to Coast, Stephen Quayle with us. Stephen, and let's talk a little bit about what you touched on, and that is the massive coverage we're getting about Hitler staging his death and taking off. I was convinced years ago, when we heard accounts that he burned his body and his girlfriend's body, his fiancée, they were hiding something. I mean, it was obvious, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and what's known in a matter of historic record, which I document extensively, is that both of them had duplicates. Even modern, I'm not saying they were clones, but they had look-alikes. And that was in order because, if you remember, the assassination attempts against Hitler, he was very, 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 at that point on, and even prior to that, worried that would be the case.
Oh, my God. He was paranoid.
I think he bordered on more of a paranoid, but he was also psychotic. And with that, he basically became so enamored with the idea of making, if you will, a bunch of little Hitlers, that he made sure that there were duplicates and even triplicates of them. Now, I'm not talking about true identical clones, but which brings me to the next point. If Mengele was able to do all the things that he had done, and by the way, a lot of the reason why so much is unknown about both Hitler and Mengele is to cover up that the United States pretty much, how should we say, vacuum cleaned up all of their known resources, meaning in research, and integrated it into our own defense community. It was no, how do I say this? It was not by accident. Even people that were full-blown Nazis were given new identities, and the famous Dr. Ishii of Unit 731, which was the Japanese equivalent of Mengele, was brought into the United States and given a new identity, and they lived peacefully in the United States under a guise of basically, what would you say? They were given a whole new persona, and they never had to atone or account for their misdeeds. Now, again, it becomes hard for people to understand every day, George, the acceleration of biology, of all of the attenuating things that they're going to do with gene editing. Obviously, what we're seeing now is the time when, talking about this stuff 10 years ago, my email, ha. Now, I think more people are going, because when you're dealing with singularity, when you're dealing with human enhancement, when you're dealing with cloning humans, when you're dealing with all these things where it was future tense, now it's present, and it's present headlines. Well, I submit to you that obviously somebody has Hitler's real DNA. I submit to you that it would be a fascinating twist on even the standard dispensational Bible prophecy that if Hitler claimed he was going to rule and reign 1,000 years, maybe instead of just the ravings of a madman, he knew more about the cloning that would be done. And most people used to look at cloning as just scientific clowning around. But now, I'm telling you, it is astonishing to me. There is no shortage of stories of human genetic enhancement, which brings us back to Admiral Byrd going into the hollow earth. Mm-hmm. There are people that claim Byrd's diaries are fake, but here you have a Navy admiral that absolutely, after his briefing from 1947, he disappears for 8 years. They literally put him out to pasture or kept him away from being able to talk to people. And that's that whole time when the Men in Black came out, the UFOs, remember, from Roswell on. And I've long maintained that from all my writings and research that the whole flying saucer phenomenon is more of an extra-dimensional, not an extraterrestrial, though they can, obviously, once they enter into our dimension. So, getting back to the Nazi Stargates, it was fascinating that through the Ahnenerbe, which was a group of the SS that went throughout the world looking for religious relics, i.e. the Spear of Longinus, they were looking for the chalice, they were looking for the Ark of the Covenant, but they were also looking, interestingly enough, for giants, and I just had to throw that in. Even Mengele would sit on the ramp at the different camps that they would bring the people to be destroyed into, and he would specifically want anyone who had any genetic difference, but he spelled out, interestingly, giants and dwarfs. Now, what that's critical for is because when Byrd's diary is gone over by, on hour by hour, almost minute by minute, the race that the king of the world, and that's what he's called, is called the Ariana. And they were looking for the Aryan. The Nazis thought that there were two opposing factions. There was Shambhala, obviously Three Dog Night fame, and then there was Agatha. And so they saw these two, if you will, old, multi tens of thousands of year old civilizations at war. And they decided they wanted to side with the Ariana. So the point being is when the Admiral Byrd is taken, his aircraft is like kind of taken in with a tractor beam, and it lands, and he's taken to meet, quote, the king of the world. What's fascinating is everything has German names. You probably have seen that. They refer
That's right.
to the Fugelstedt, the flying saucers. So when you've got Russians corroborating it, you've got the U.S., you've got, listen, Nick Cook, Zero Point Energy, did a fabulous job. Jerry Corsi on Hitler did a fabulous job. But why is it now all coalescing? Why is it you and I are on Coast to Coast in your show on December 4th, and on October 20th, 2015, another Arctic anomaly shows up, and it matches the one of the ESSA, the Earth satellite, of almost 20 years ago. And that's when people would not have even believed this stuff. Now, I believe, too, here's something that the Stargate phenomena is becoming more prevalent every day. You saw that the new gamma scanning of the King's Chamber and what may be Queen Nefertiti's tomb in the Great Pyramid of Giza. What was interesting to me about that is the timing of all this. So what I look at, and I think you and I have done this over the years that you've interviewed me and we've talked on radio, is I look for the coalescing, or like a hub, all the different spokes coming into the center. And now Hitler, let's just say this, if someone were to say that the Fuhrer is alive, and remember this, that the Wall Street financiers absolutely were tied in with the German financiers and the bankers. Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution by Anthony Sutton laid that out easily. But if
there was a Bush, was it Prescott Bush?
Yep.
Who supported Hitler?
Absolutely. Now, I would say this: it's fascinating that if you look at what people don't understand, and this is where it gets relevant too, is the Muslims sided with Hitler during World War II, especially in North Africa, where the Desert Fox, Rommel, was stationed. But it's not that he was it, but the whole timing of all of these Hitlerian revelations now are astonishing to me. What would happen, I'm throwing this out, what would happen if we saw Hitler and we were told that he's been cloned, okay, or he was basically an alien / supernatural reproduction of the man he used to be? Maybe he doesn't look like Hitler, but maybe the people in the know, bring him out at the right time. And let's say the advanced technology of the UFOs that the Nazis have had now, obviously 1947, that's given them 68, almost 70 years. And what happens if from their under the ice base and other underground bases around the world, they pretty much are pulling the strings? There's an unseen hand that pretty much controls everything on the planet. And so the World War III that we see unfolding right now, and I can tell you this, if people think this is just a game, they don't understand the history of the Cold War. This is the hottest, most tense period there has ever been after the official close of World War III. And now we're getting into a situation where the unseen hand may play it. These guys want to destroy 90% of the world's population. You and I talk about that, but 90% of those people don't believe it,
Well, it's out there. What do you think about this, that Adolf Hitler's autobiography and manifesto, Mein Kampf,
yes, sir,
is going to be republished in Germany for the first time since 1945. They're going to do it with 4,000 copies just to start. What are they doing?
Well, I think what they're doing is basically they're going to look for the final solution to their own situation. The fact that if you look at Angela Merkel and what she's done, and by the way, I don't call it immigration, I call it invasion. And I think if you've seen, did you see the 19-minute video of just the tens of thousands of Middle Easterners flooding the German and Austrian countryside?
Oh, my God, yeah.
And the only way you could liken it is to a swarm of ants. I tried to come up with some form of a word picture to explain to people, and that's on YouTube. But now YouTube took it down, so I think it's hosted on their sites now. But look at what Merkel's done. Now, here's what's going on, ladies and gentlemen, and George, this makes perfect sense in knowing the order out of chaos. John Kerry told it. They signal what they're doing. They're creating global chaos by bringing in the undocumented or non-checked out refugees, and they're overwhelming the systems. They're taking down countries. Michael Savage says it's border language cultures, and that's exactly what they're destroying. So by bringing out Mein Kampf, you're going to see the right rise in Germany. You're going to see the great-great-grandchildren of these people that I detail in my book. By the way, it's 520 pages, it's 200 illustrations, and it's the most mind-boggling investigation I've ever done, and I get into some weird stuff, okay? But the point is that this is the, I guess you'd say, the crown jewel of weird stuff, because it is so apropos. The roadmap for how the, if you will, the secret control of the government, it was running things after World War II, even right up into our day. Now you're seeing the intentional disruption of national borders. Everything that you could even term as culture is being absolutely destroyed. By the way, that's what Hitler did too. Here's the parallel. Hitler and his SS made sure that only official art, that art which basically promoted their viewpoint, was allowed. Everything else was burned or sold off. Martin Bormann was smart. He said, why burn it when I can make some cash on it? But the point being is that we saw the ransacking of culture that had existed before in Germany and in that whole part of the world, Western Europe going into Eastern Europe. And what do we see now? We see the downfall of Western culture. We see the overwhelming attendant issues coming with the invasion. And again, you can study the Trojan Wars all you want and the Trojan horse, and we've got Trojan policy. So the idea is this: total destabilization of the world, basically getting war going on all fronts, the depopulation of the world, and then bringing on the man of peace, who these guys, all the globalists, the industrials, and the secret rulers of the world basically are going to bring into the public eye. They have to create the problem. They've got to make it so bad, so desperate, and so horrible that anybody that brings peace brings it. And that's why the Bible calls him the man of peace.
I have been talking for 4 years, Stephen, that I've been feeling something strange about to happen. It's manifested itself. It's become more current. A lot of other people have been feeling things. I think the episodes that have been going on now in Paris and the tragedy in San Bernardino, California, I think that's what we've been feeling.
Oh, absolutely. And isn't it fascinating that every time there's a tragedy, there's a correspondent exercise going along with it within hours of the event?
It is weird. It is
well,
weird.
Here's why it's not weird. It's staged, okay? Now, don't get me wrong. When I say staged, I don't mean people really died. But what I'm saying is that some people want to say it's all theatrics. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that the more and more the horror, the greater the cry will be to do us something. Now,
yes, almost begging.
Almost begging. And see, that's what, I mean, you've got to ask yourself this, and it doesn't matter who the President of the United States is. His number one priority in a constitutional republic, which obviously he doesn't believe in, is to protect the people. What's astonishing to me is that it's obvious when you've got the Border Patrol, when you've got the military, when you've got everybody screaming. Look, we're provoking Russia to go into World War III. Right. Why? Well, the reason is simple this. It facilitates the global mindset. Vladimir Putin is I believe, one of the smartest men in the world, because he's not going to drag himself into that or allow himself to be dragged into it. But he's already said, look, I'll deal with this the way it needs to be dealt with.
He's a chess player.
He's a chess player. And, the deal is, just because a pigeon he's a chess player. But I think you probably saw the quote, just because a pigeon walks all over the chessboard, defecates on the chessboard, and then claims he won the chess game doesn't mean he won the chess game. In other words, if you take the world as a chessboard and the people that know how to play chess, yet somebody comes in and just says, I know what I'm doing. The man that represents the United States now is held in total contempt. And one of the thing is, and I'm saying this on a world stage, we have watched the decimation of the country take hold. The middle class is destroyed. And people say, I don't believe that. Oh, yeah? Remember all the times we used to hear that retail sales drove the economy?
They're not driving it anymore.
Yeah, well, let's just say this. They may have driven it, but now it's over the cliff. The debt structure in America is basically a mantra of nonsense. We owe so much money that, the 18 trillion, the 20 trillion, the 200 trillion, it's beyond that. The smartest minds in the world can post 100 different reasons why we're facing collapse. And you know what? Everybody says, well, the game's still on, I still got my, whatever they've got that they think is...
Well, that they think they have.
That they think they have. It's kind of like this. It's kind of like you're living in a mansion. It's in a termite-infested woods. Everything is eaten out from under the way, and you're just waiting for the right wind to blow, and the whole place comes down. And the idea that the United States should engage Russia is silly. We had the opportunity to demonstrate to Russia we weren't the carpet-bagging, and I mean that, foreign policy enforcers that we basically raped, pillaged, and plundered, and then built up all these puppet governments around the world. We could have really made a difference. And I think that when you've got Vladimir Putin having the head of the Russian Orthodox Church praying over his men, and the President of the United States denying prayer to his men, when you've got Spetsnaz, I don't think Russian special forces are impressed with the new footgear of the American fighting soldier. And I'm not mocking, I'm just defining when they have to put on red high heels shoes to know what it's like to be a woman or wear a pregnancy simulator. I don't think that impresses the world's military powers at all. So what's happened?
Jeez.
We're seeing the total, in my opinion, setup for the destruction of the United States, both internally and the provocation of, it doesn't matter if it's China, doesn't matter if it's Russia, doesn't matter if it's us giving not giving Germany's gold back.